Hello everyone. Imagine my surprise when yesterday I get home from work, sit down at the computer ready to de-stress, only to find this particular video here sitting in my discovery queue. So I'm going to watch it, go through it today, and maybe come up with some interesting things to say about the subject matter. Or maybe I might just nod and go, that's right. I've not watched it yet, so this will be interesting.
This video is part 2 in a 2-part series on every faction re-explained. If you've not seen part 1, you were either snatched by the YouTube algorithm, or you don't let anything, not even common sense, hold you back. And for that, well, I wish I could be that strong. The quest to find the Primarchs was expansive and treacherous, to the point where they really should write a book about it. Despite never seeing...
Funny, I know I've stopped already. Funny thing, there was a plan to do 8 books or something. They were just like, oh yeah, we're gonna do the Horus Heresy. Okay, and it was a matter of, here's the main 3 books, the the lead up and the Istvan crisis and the assault on Terra, and then a few elsewhere scattered just to tell you the general story of what's going on. And then they didn't stop because they're like, hey, people are buying these, so let's keep making them.
The Emperor before in their lives, the Primarchs all instinctively knew who the Emperor was. Whether it's his psychic connection to him or just plain old intuition, the giant golden god is a bit of a giveaway. The Primarchs all lived their own lives, and some lived substantially better lives than others. Rabute Gilliman of the Ultramarines rose through the ranks of his worlds and ended up turning an entire sector into a high-functioning society, where others like Mortari...
Yes, true. Ultramar is like the 500 worlds, I think they call it, and it's pretty much its own. Well, it was its own subsector for a while, and then they just turned it into a whole sector. It's the Ultramar sector, but I believe it used to actually be a subsector of that region, and just happened to be ruled over by the Ultramarines.
Lived on the poisonous hellscape of Barbarous under the boot heel of his own adopted father. When the Emperor arrived, some wanted to play a little bit of catch with their dad at first, and some didn't trust the baseball bat he was carrying, and some didn't want to play at all. Eventually, one by one, the Emperor returned his sons to his side to bring them back together as one happy family. A family who needed a good cleaning. Are you tired of boring old soap? Is your son the foulest being ever? Do your eyes sting when he comes near? Well, clean that man right back up with the power of Cheeky. That's right, the brand new moisturizing bar soap brought to you by Moist Critical and Bricky approved. Nurgle hates it, but you'll love it. Bar soap is always so sticky and has a ton of fuss, but now you'll be glowing to the surprise of leaving rust. Cheeky soap is so good, we didn't even take a down payment for the sponsor. That's right, we love this soap so much, we are operating on 100% commission. We are supported purely and only by those of you who buy Cheeky. It is the best bar soap we have ever used. That is not a hyperbole. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. Take it from the man himself.
Bricky's right, it's very good.
Enjoy a multitude of flavors, including lo-fi lavender, Pope Francis, just soap, touch grass, and absolute cinnamon. Cheeky alone has made me swap back to bar soap as my primary choice. No more liquid soap for this brick. Cheeky is the play. Go ahead and go to usecheeky.com/Bricky or code Bricky for 10% off your purchase and to massively support these videos. That's code Bricky at usecheeky.com/Bricky or click the link in the description to learn more. Get clean now.
Do please get clean. In my time working for Games Workshop, one of the things that was contentious amongst the staff were the young lads who would come in without actually having washed, and would spend hours in a not exactly air-conditioned building, sometimes in the middle of summer, with little more than a couple of fans. Yeah, fun times indeed.
Oh, yeah, so half his sons turned on him. After the Emperor was able to bring all of his sons back into the fold again, he sent them on their way with his end goal in mind, reclaiming the lost worlds of humanity. Each of his Primarchs fanned out across the galaxy to accomplish this goal, but the one they were expected to report to was his favored son, and the first one found, allegedly, which was Horus.
Yeah, the whole allegedly thing is like, oh, but was he really the first one found? Because technically the Emperor was in psychic communication with Magnus the Red before he even left Terra. It's all a thing.
Horus was granted the title of War Master, and he certainly lived up to Big E's expectations, which were very specific and set by Big E himself to all of his sons. However, either intentionally or not, the Emperor did not mention to his sons some of the more chaotic aspects of the galaxy. Horus himself, while in...
This is a huge thing that, from what I understand in the books, is very back and forth with Games Workshop's traditional unreliable narrator of was it not, it is in this book, it isn't in that book, who knows, because everything's true until it's not, and everything's done from the perspective of a person here or a person there, and they might not have the full story, or they might be misconstruing the truth. It's like, yeah, the Emperor was leading, and then he went, okay, I've got a job to do. I need to go back to Terra because I've got a project that I need to work on. Horus here, he's the guy who is the best suited for the role. He's now the one who's in charge. And yeah, there's a whole thing about, but they're all supposed to be brothers, and now one brother's been put on a pedestal above all the others because he's now the one who's in charge, and discontent going here, there and everywhere, and nobody really liked anybody else. It's a thing. It's very much a thing. But yeah, it was like he's in charge now because the Emperor needs to go back to Terra to work on the Webway project, I think it was.
In the process of reclaiming a more advanced human world, was informed of the existence of Chaos Gods, a factoid that Horus initially did not believe. To him...
Oh yeah, sorry. I was going to get on this, but I completely forgot I just mentioned it because my memory is... I don't know. I might have ADHD, I don't know. Anyway, yes, the whole thing with the Chaos Gods was the Imperial truth. And it's to say, there are no gods. Because the moment you start believing in gods, that gives them power, and because they control the Materium, and the Materium is what the Imperial ships had to fly through with the warp drives, better to say that these things don't exist and nobody can possibly have any idea that they exist if you just say nope, they're not real, and suppress any notion of them. Then eventually people will forget, and the power will go away, and the warp will stabilize, and then they'll have unfettered access everywhere. That, as I understand it, was the idea.
It was a bit unfathomable to think that his father would emit such significant information on the inner workings of the galaxy. However, he soon realized this was the truth, and this betrayal was unacceptable. With the astronomical weight...
that was the Temple of Davin incident, where, well, technically it's the Temple of Davin incident. You see, Horus had been wounded by I think it was a commandant or someone, a planetary governor, who had been given an anathema, which was probably the one that was stolen from the technocracy by the word bearers, because their whole plan, probably, I think it was Erebus's plan, because Erebus is a shitbag. His plan was to go, I'm going to get this weapon because I've just seen it. So he wouldn't have known that the anathema existed on the technocracy's museum section, whatever. He wouldn't have known it was there before he turned up. He got that and went, oh, okay, here's the plan. If I take that, it becomes a lethal weapon to anybody whose name is whispered to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a plan whereby I convince a planetary governor that has been left behind by Horus's expedition fleet to start worshipping Nurgle and give him the anathema so that Horus will be forced to return to the world, fight him, get stabbed, and then I can get him taken to Davin, where he will be put into a Chaos Temple, and then I can get him corrupted by the Chaos Gods. What a shit plan. But it worked.
Put on his shoulders, and his father immediately leaving it all in his hands, combined with the slow corruption of his mind by those closest to him, he began to change his tune. Horus began amassing a following behind his father's back, with several other Primarchs,
and no, in the actual, I think it's the Horus Rising book. I've got the books on my shelf, but I've not read them in years. There was corruption within the legions, with the warrior lodges having secret societies essentially within legions. But it wasn't until he was actually taken and put on a slab and had essentially a face-to-face conversation with the Chaos Gods and Erebus that he actually went, oh, gods are real, and he switched on a dime.
Began to formulate plans to usurp him from his throne on Terra. While this was occurring, Magnus the Red tried to FaceTime his dad back on Terra, and that resulted in the shattering of a protective barrier.
Yes, because Magnus tried to stop it. He tried to stop Horus getting corrupted by the Chaos Gods. Magnus, was trying to be a good guy. But because Tzeentch manipulation, his good intentions resulted in everything going wrong.
Between Terra and the demons of the warp. Due to this damage, the Emperor was forced to sit on the Golden Throne to assure that it would continue to function. Ultimately, half of the Primarchs would fall to chaos, and the remaining half would fight back viciously against their brothers. Horus eventually gained the upper hand and arrived in orbit above Terra itself, and after antagonizing his father enough, the Emperor temporarily removed himself from the throne, strategically putting his old friend there as a seat warmer, and
yeah, apparently he didn't last. He was there and he kind of went, oh, the amount of psychic power required to keep this thing running is ridiculously immense, and was turned to dust. I've not read that particular bit from whatever book it's in, but I don't remember it being in any of the original, the original Horus Heresy novels. So yeah, Malcador Sigilite was like, oh yeah, I'm dust now.
Went to confront Horus himself on the Vengeful Spirit, his flagship. The Emperor faced down his son, and after a heated battle and 64 novels, the Emperor managed to obliterate Horus on a subatomic level, but not before his favorite son.
That's new lore. It was not being obliterated on a subatomic level. He was obliterated on a psychic level. His soul essentially was destroyed entirely. And he had to have that done because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to be cloned by the Emperor's children, because if he's destroyed on a subatomic level, there's nothing to clone.
Was able to mortally wound the Emperor. As the dust settled and the traitors fled from Terra, the Emperor's body was dragged back onto the Golden Throne, where it sits permanently to assure that it continues to function. A corpse forced to constantly hold back the horrors of the warp and guide humanity with his pale light. And that light is flickering. From there, the remaining members of the traitors to the Emperor fled to their respective safe havens. These are the veterans of the Long War, the spiteful, and to them, the wronged. Those who would let the galaxy burn if it means the Imperium gets caught in the flames. These are the...
Not all of them, mind you. There have been several that have fallen to chaos since. So you do have two sections within it. You do have the original traitors, and then you've got the renegades. The renegades are the ones who have essentially come later and have done something somewhere that has pissed off the Imperium, like the Red Corsairs, for instance. Again, good intentions with instructions to do certain things, but not the support to do certain things, so they had to try and figure it out themselves, and then the Imperium went, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" essentially, and slapped them around until they all got declared excommunicate traitores, essentially.
And what are the achievements of your fragile Imperium? It is a corpse rotting slowly from within while maggots writhe in its belly. It was built with the toil of heroes and giants, and now it is inhabited by frightened weaklings to whom the glories of those times are half-forgotten legends. I have forgotten nothing, and my wisdom has expanded far beyond mere mortal frailties.
That is, as I recall, one of the concerns that were raised during the Horus Heresy was that all the Space Marines going out and conquering all these lands, and then they're being told, again, I think it was mostly from the word bearers, because the word bearers are dicks, that isn't it weird that all these lands that we're taking, we're securing, we're bringing to compliance, are being given over to lesser men to look after?
The Horus Heresy saw the collapse of the Imperium as we knew it at the time, and half of the Space Marine legions fell to the ruinous powers. Though the favored son, War Master Horus, was killed and the rebellion ended, the heretical forces retreated to the warp and remain a constant threat to this day. The twisted reminder of what the temptations of the warp may bring, the Chaos Space Marines act as a mirror to the loyal legions, and as time progresses, their warp taint further changes them to suit the needs of their patron deity. Though marred and absolutely mangled by the ruinous powers, they are still unmistakably Space Marines in stature and shape, and according to them, they have never...
This is an interesting piece of art here, because this appears to be a Terminator. It's got the standard Terminator helmet, the Terminator, back piece, but those shoulders would normally be a lot higher, and they'd be kind of in connection with the big square back piece up there. You'd have big shoulders coming off. So I'm not quite sure who drew that. and exactly what reference they were taking, but oh well, I guess. I don't know what legion or chapter, not chapter, but warband rather they would be. Red, so probably Khorne, but beyond that, meh.
Ever been
also
more free. After the heresy, the loyal legions of Space Marines became...
There you are. See, this is what they should look like. That's what the standard Terminator armor should look like. It should have those shoulders like much higher up there rather than the previous one.
Very strict in their organization, and their separation into separate chapters with capped numbers and other formalities was done to prevent any form of heresy from happening again.
And then Robert Gilliman went and just contradicted his own orders and said, everybody gets 1,000 Space Marines except the Space Wolves, because if I try to force them to do it, then they're just going to raise a ruckus and get into a fight because they're uncultured barbarian scum. And so they can just do whatever because blow them really. But everybody else, 1,000 Space Marines per chapter. Except for me, I'm going to get a guy to go and make Super Space Marines and keep them all over the galaxy in secret vaults for when I need a legion that will be mine and mine alone. And then the Primaris popped out 11,000 years later, and it was decided actually okay, let's do the whole, they can all have their chapters as well, and they can all be reinforcements for all the existing chapters as well. Yeah, but they're all made under the instructions of Robert Gilliman, who wrote the Codex Astartes in order to prevent anybody from having the power of a legion, and then gave himself the power of a legion.
The Chaos Space Marines are a bit different. Ultimately, these Marines are subject to the primary legions that fell to Chaos in the first place. The majority of these legions, the Black Legion, the Word Bearers, Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, and the Night Lords, are supporters of Chaos undivided, either enjoying the powers of all Chaos gods or sometimes shunning them altogether. But a few of them follow a very specific Chaos god. Thousand Sons are followers of Tzeentch, the Death.
Thousand Sons, followers of Tzeentch, yes, but not because they intended to. It's because Tzeentch is a trickery bastard, and they didn't know that they were following Tzeentch by having their companion spirit creatures that wandering around and helping them with those psychic powers, and everything was kind of like, oh yeah, as far as we know, we are the good guys, until the burning of Prospero, when they all got evacuated, or I say all, the remaining of them got evacuated via a massive portal, and went, oh, as it actually turns out, we've been worshipping Tzeentch and didn't know the whole time. And the Death Guard here, similar thing. They were not actually intended, they were intended to follow Nurgle, but it's not something they chose. It's something that one guy chose, because while they were in the warp, all their warp engines were shut down through sabotage, and there was plagues started ravaging the entire legion, and they were kind of only given a choice of die or submit to Nurgle, all because Typhus wanted it.
Death Guard follows Nurgle. Slaanesh
has the Emperor's children, yes, because although again it's more that their Primarch started following Slaanesh because he picked up the Lair Blade, and the Lair Blade had a demon bound within it, and it started corrupting him, and the corruption spread throughout the Legion. Yes, so again, it's top-down corruption from them.
Their claws in the Emperor's children, and the World Eaters are avid followers of Khorne.
World Eater, again, I don't think World Eaters ever actually properly dedicated themselves on actual spiritual level to Khorne, because by the time that they had actually become puppets of Khorne, they were all just running around with butcher's nails in their heads because they wanted to be closer to their Primarch, who had butcher's nails in his heads, and they were just psychopaths. And it was like, okay, well, Khorne was like, yeah, cool, I'm having those guys because they just run around butchering stuff. They're mine. So again, I don't remember there being anything for them specifically trying to court the attention of Khorne. It's just what happened because they all wanted to be close to their father, and to do that they all had to be psychopaths.
From there, the legions themselves are separated into roaming war bands that may go under their own unique names or may stake a claim to one of the primary legions. Most of the gear and armor of a Chaos Space Marine remains the same, but stylistically it changes quite a bit to reflect the intention of the legion or their patron god. The Death Guard's armor has become rotted and full of gaping mouths and plague-filled boils. The World Eater's sharp and violent armor reflects their bloodthirst, and the chaotic noise of the Emperor's children armor, nipple rings included, pleases Slaanesh greatly. Due to the taint of chaos, the armor itself becomes less about plating and more about a new skin for any given Chaos Space Marine.
Well, kinda. There was a thing whereby a Chaos Space Marine, if he was correctly blessed by his patron, could have his armor become part of him, and thereby apparently give him even better protection than what he would have if it was just powered armor. But it's not a kind of a thing that you become a Chaos Space Marine, you get the armor becoming a second skin for you, because they scavenge armor, because they can't. But I think they've changed lore and here and there and everywhere, so the Dark Mechanicus can probably make more power armor, but mostly the Trials of Ascension, whereby a Space Marine or a new Chaos Space Marine can obtain a part in a Legion or a warband, is to kill someone above them and take their armor and use that armor for themselves. It is of note that in the Dark Heresy, I think it is Dark Heresy RPG, where you can play Chaos Space Marines, you roll on a table to find out the history of your armor, and you can have armor that is won through violent conflict from other people. So it's not a second skin, it is actually still armor.
Though the Chaos Space Marines have no true fear of death or numbers diminishing, there are still major recruitment efforts for their legions. However, the conscription of these recruits is a lot more chaos-fueled and is more of a forced assimilation, and in some instances, breeding. The organ implementations,
yeah, you don't want to read about that unless you are really into that sort of thing,
and other modifications are the same, and the necessity of a gene seed remains the same, but the result is a hell of a lot different. Understanding Chaos Space Marines is a difficult exercise. If we took my original video 5 years back and looked at the Imperial Knights section, it mainly focuses on big stompy robots. Now that I understand more, I can discuss the Code Chivalric, the Throne Mechanicum, Squires, and Monarchs, and bring some more context to it all. To assume Chaos Space Marines are simply the opposite side of Space Marines would be foolish, for once you understand the plight of their Primarchs, it can provide a context always needed. Horus himself turned through an overwhelming weight on his shoulders and lies told by his father.
Yeah.
But what of Angron? Angron lived as a slave gladiator for his planet's masters, who took Dark Age technology and shoved it into his brain, so experiencing any emotion other than rage was agony for him. He finally leads a revolt for his fellow gladiators and frees himself from the conflict.
He is Space Spartacus, only angrier because he doesn't have a choice. It's the butcher's nails in his head that make him have to be angry, otherwise he's in pain.
Finds of servitude. The Emperor finds him and says he will take him home, but Angron refuses. He will fight with his friends against the tyranny of his slave owners to the last. At the final last stand with him and his closest friends, slave gladiators, all of them outnumbered and on the verge of death, the Emperor forcefully teleports Angron to his flagship. And
the way I remember it was the night before. They weren't actually in combat. They were outnumbered, they were encamped, they were ready to fight, and the Emperor just went, actually no, I'm not actually going to let you do this, because even though you could probably win, there is a chance you could lose, and therefore I'm not going to. So it is no wonder that Angron got a lot of resentment for the Emperor, because there he was with his blood brothers ready to fight the corrupt government and lay down his life if need be in the defense of all his brothers, and the Emperor just goes, no, snaps his fingers, takes him away, and now you're going to lead a legion over there, bye. Which is in stark contrast to what he did with other ones. It's very much, the thing is, the characters were decided upon 30 years ago who was going to be loyalist, who was going to be chaos, and only after that point was it actually worked out why. And so you've got all these writers as well writing these things, and it's like, hey, it's Spartacus, but what if Spartacus was taken away and now just really fucking hates the Emperor?
None of his compatriots, leaving Angron to live and watch all of his friends die. You kept that mule Corferon. Russ kept his kin friends. The Lion kept Luther. Humans, brothers, and foster fathers, saved and raised into legion ranks. But not me. Not Angron, no. Did the Emperor teleport his gold-wrapped custodians down to help me in my army? No. Did he free the warhounds and order them to battle, fight alongside me? No. Did he save my brothers and sisters the way he spared and honored the Lion's kin, the way he honored Corferon? No, no, and no. No mercy for Angron, Angron the Oathbreaker, Angron the Betrayer. Conrad Kurz lived as a lonely boy scrounging the dregs of a hive city plagued by constant visions of an assassin sent to murder him by his own father. Lorgar was born on a world.
He also spent his time punishing lawbreakers, and it didn't matter what the law was. You would get the harshest and most violent punishment he could think of. Reason? Ethics? None of it. You broken the law? Death? But in a very, very drawn out, very painful way, so that other people can see that, and they will decide maybe breaking the law is not such a good idea.
World of chaos worshippers with abusive parents, and the Emperor decided the best way to reprimand him was destroy his holy city. The Emperor robbed Mortarion of vengeance.
Again, that goes back to the imperial truth, and there's more to it than just this, because they were the slowest legion for bringing place into compliance, because they kept on building temples, and the imperial truth was specifically against worship of gods. And what does a temple do? It says, there's gods out there. That was the whole point of the raising of Monarchia. It was to say, no, you're doing it wrong. You are giving faith to people that should not have faith. They should believe in the imperial truth. Now get out there and do it correctly.
Vengeance and suppress Magnus at every turn. The question isn't why the Primarchs rebelled. The question is, why didn't they sooner? To them, they are not the betrayers. They are the betrayed. They were under the boot of a golden tyrant, and they finally could be free from his heel. Of course, things have changed a lot since the heresy, and the Primarchs of the Chaos Space Marines that have survived the fall are a twisted variant of what they used to be. They have all, for the most part, ascended to the position of Demon Prince and act as a direct connection between their god and their legion. However, due to the nature of the transformation and dedication to a particular chaos god, their actions tend to be separate from their legion's actions.
Yeah, again, it's one of these crazy things with the way the warp works, in that becoming a Demon Prince means you become part warp, and because the warp and the gods are the same thing, then you become part of your chosen god or gods, and thereby their influence upon you is stronger, even if you're now immortal.
For example, is so infatuated with being a Demon Prince of Slaanesh that he is at times far too focused on his own personal perfection as opposed to conquest. And
this is a story I really, really fucking hate, and a lot of people hate, and it's called The Mirror Cracked, because the story is that he's supposed to be, or originally the story was that he sought out perfection in all things, and that is why he was given the honor of his legion wearing the imperial eagle, essentially, which is what that is. It's like they were so good at what they did that they were honored, and he was supposed to be a tragic fall in the original work, in that he didn't realize how subtle the changes being wrought upon him were by the Lair Blade, until such a point right at the drop site massacres, when he killed Ferrus Manus, that the demon in the blade just released all its hold on him and went, look what you've done. And he was shattered by it. He was so wrought with disgust and with his actions that he literally felt like he could not live with himself for what he had done without knowing he was pushing things along this route. And the Lair Blade Demon went, I can make it all better. Just let me take over. I'll make it all better. And Fulgrim said yes in a moment of weakness. I was trapped in a painting, and the Lair Blade took over and gave you the form that you can see there. Then came the Mirror Cracked, in which they went, actually no, he was evil all along, and he went back in and now he's evil. It's terrible, terrible writing.
Sitting around like Frankfurter on his throne. Meanwhile, Lorgar is being stalked by a bird, so he's always on edge. The most adamant against the temptations of the Chaos Gods, Perturabo, was even made a Demon Prince as a reward for being the one who did the most work on the group project. Chaos Space Marines are a fascinating faction, because there is a great deal of cognitive dissonance that is represented in them. Depending on which faction you follow, your devotion to Chaos is a sliding scale, and the representation in the universe is so varied. Some are there to reap a high tally of kills for their patron deity, while others are there purely to destroy the Imperium who wronged them. Some are there to torture and maim, and some are there to conquest and conquer. There is no unifying glue. They fight each other as much as they fight everyone else, and they're...
One of the best things about Chaos is that if you happen, like me, to create your own chapters, you can have a Space Marine chapter that is on the very verge of being outright heretical. You can have that, and you can say they're still loyalist, but they do things that are so very, very close that if they were investigated, then yes, they would be declared excommunicate traitores. But they still believe that they are the loyal ones.
Their machinations are entirely up to their warband. You have all walked different paths, but together we have come to the same destination. The Emperor has failed us. The Imperium has failed us all. It has failed us by the laxity of its laws, the decadence of its culture, and in the injustices heaped upon those of us who serve the most loyally. It has failed us by never recognizing our virtues, never rewarding us for the blood we shed and bringing about its ascendancy, and never providing unity when we needed it most. It has failed us by being flawed to its core, imperfect in its pursuit of a perfect culture, and in its weakness against the encroachment of Xenos breeds that seek to twist humanity to alien ends. And it has failed us, most of all, by being founded upon lies. The Imperium is forged by a dangerous deceit and erodes us all by demanding we sacrifice truth on the altar of necessity. This is an empire propagated by sin that deserves to die. And here on Istvan V, we begin the purge. From these ashes shall rise the new kingdom of mankind, an imperium of justice, faith, and enlightenment, an imperium heralded, commanded, and protected by the avatars of the gods themselves, an empire strong enough to stand through a future of blood and fire. Naturally, however, as I have said before, Space Marines do not make up the bulk of the fighting force in the Imperium, so it would be ludicrous for me to not mention their dark cousins. The Code Chivalry is the sign of the power of the Imperial Knights. But what about the...
Right, truth be told, I don't really know much about these guys.
The ruinous powers claimed during the Horus Heresy extended beyond just the Space Marines and the Primarchs. Mars itself was subject to a revolution that saw half of them fall to chaos as well. And some of the once loyal knight houses saw themselves swearing fealty to the dark gods. The falling of these factions allows for the war machine of chaos to continue uninterrupted and to have firepower equal to that of the Imperium itself. The Dark Mechanicum, as the name suggests, is the chaos-affiliated branch of the Mechanicus, and have a lot more free reign, much like the freedoms of the Chaos Space Marines. The seeds of the Dark Mechanicum were planted fairly early due to some of the Mechanicum not really seeing the Emperor as the Omnissiah immediately, and Horus exploited this to allow the schism to happen a bit more naturally. Unlike their Imperial brothers, the Dark Mechanicum have the ability to invent and innovate. What a concept. While also...
I mean, it is a very... quite a big concept to... quite an alien concept, in fact, to the Mechanicus. Because to the Mechanicus, doctrine says that all human invention has already been discovered and was discovered during the Golden Age, and just merely needs to be rediscovered by finding STCs, and thereby stating that there is no need for invention because you're never going to discover anything that hasn't been discovered already. And what's the point of wasting time and effort on trying to discover something that has already been discovered when you can just go out and find the STC for it?
Utilizing forbidden technologies such as the Silica Animus or AI. The Dark Mechanicum do have their own desires to find lost technologies and put them to use, but they're more interested in taking ancient and forbidden technology from Imperial worlds and activating them for their own purposes. Because what good is a bunch of knob and tube wiring if you don't overload it with as many extension cords as possible? However, instead of being clear-cut and more generalized creations, the inventions of the Dark Mechanicum are inherently tied with the warp and its demons. Genetic experimentation and modification, the fusion of man and machine are exceptionally common, and no creation is more reflective of this than the demon engines. Instead of regular tanks and vehicles, the demon engines are machines bound with the presence of demons to make them living war machines. Unlike the vehicles of the Imperium, where a Mechanicus priest may be there to aid in its repair, a Warpsmith sorcerer is there to essentially repair and irritate the demon engine so that it can be a more effective killing machine. In certain factions, like the bitter and siege-loving Iron Warriors, they will lure demons with the promise of glory and easy bloodletting, only to then forcibly trap them into these demonic engines to use as weapons of war against the Imperium. Some lesser gods, like Vashtor the Archifane, is also a contract and arms dealer for the demonic stuff that comes out of chaos. Many demons may sign a pact with Vashtor in the soul forges of the warp, and in doing so are given the weapons of war to kill as much as they can. Should they do so, excellent, you may keep it. Should you...
Just want to point out that this Marine here, he appears to be incredibly shit at choosing where to shoot. Because that bolt that's coming out of there looks like it's aimed at the barrel of this gun rather than all the rest of this. Don't fucking shoot that. Shoot up here. Shoot the cable. Blow the arm off. Don't try and shoot the barrel.
Not, I hope you enjoy your soul working in the forges for all eternity. That's what you signed with blood and oil. In addition, much like their ties in the Loyalist realm, the Dark Mechanicum and the Chaos Knight houses are deeply intertwined. There were, of course, many Knight houses that swore fealty and bent the knee to War Master Horus during the heresy, but a good portion of them had no choice, as they were absorbed by warp storms and corrupted into compliance. Many of these Chaos Knights reflect the very early Dark Age technology Knights with more corrupted weapons. The Thro Mechanicum, which once had a noble sitting and taking control of generations of previous drivers and taming a beast, is now a saddle to a monstrosity of wrath and hatred. The nobles of the Chaos Knights fight to aggravate and bring the machine to their will while combating the corrupted minds of their fallen ancestors. Some of these nobles may do such a good job that they themselves fuse into the throne itself and become one with the knight. If a noble dies, no worries at all. Unlike the Imperial ones that require a pilot, a demon can hop into the cockpit and control it instead. The Night Worlds also see full corruption as well. Where there were once peasants, there are now cultists, and the goal of the Chaos Knights are just as chaotic as the gods they follow. Some are sent to war by the ruinous powers, others may protect Dark Mechanicum Forge worlds, and others still may be so hyped up on the ruinous powers that they are just aimless and reckless, hoping to unravel the fabric of the universe itself. Though the aspect of nobility is still there with the Chaos Knight, but it's hardly the same as it is on the Imperial side. As opposed to a beautiful knightly stallion, the knights here are horrifying and unpredictable monstrosities, fueled in part by the agony of the memories of the ancestors trapped within. An invasion by a house of Chaos Knights is a horrifying thing. One might ask, how do knights enter the battlefield? Normally they can be deployed via dropships the standard way, but Imperial Knights can be deployed with a drop keep. A gigantic knight keep with like towers and stuff will hurtle towards the surface like a drop pod and be slammed into the ground with an excessively thunderous crash. Then, massive drawbridges slam down, banners unfurl, and huge horns play the song of their people as these lumbering robots charge out of their, again...
That would not work. Unless you've got a incredibly sturdy superstructure, or a lot of retro engines to slow the descent just before it hits, and I mean, well, just before it hits, a fair point just before it hits, so it has enough time to slow down and land. Then if it hit like we see drop pods are often shown as hitting, just like full speed slam straight into the ground, then the upper parts of that keep are going to continue moving when the bottom part of the keep has stopped and it's going to squish itself, or pieces will fall off due to the sheer vibrational impact of colliding with solid ground. So yeah, by the by, drop pods are stupid and don't work, because again, like with that stuff inside the drop pod, you got a drop pod, you got a guy inside, the guy inside has got little squishy organs inside him. The drop pod hits the ground, it stops moving. The guy inside, he stops moving. The organs inside him do not stop moving, and he dies.
Drop keep to fight for the Imperium. So imagine what a warp-fueled version of this could look like.
If you get the opportunity, you should kill yourself.
Chaos Knights have such a presence, the warp fluctuates in their tread. They bring doom, dread, and despair across the battlefield. Warp storms occur overhead, and psychic phenomenon cling to them. A Chaos Knight will arrive either in some warp-debased platform, or perhaps a portal itself, or climb out of a pool of blood. As the air gets heavy, the enemy feels a crippling sense of paranoia, and the sky begins to rain blood, acid, and God knows what else. The horrors of the warp have resulted in a dramatic change in technology in the favor of their forces. Though in practice, it is a horror beyond comprehension, their baseline desires don't seem that radical on paper. They are creative builders, working to innovate and improve technology while utilizing anything they can to accomplish their STEM goals. Looking at the dark forces of chaos and the Emperor now on his golden throne, humanity is fractured. The Emperor himself is the guiding light for warp travel for humanity, and in being that exists as a beacon for the entire species. Without him, things would get somehow worse. Therefore, he needs his protectors. Where a Thunder Warrior wasn't enough for his armies, and half of his Space Marines turned traitor, the Emperor's personal bodyguards are something else entirely. They are not the fallible Astartes, nor are they a nightmarish concoction of organs and indoctrination. They are built and gene-crafted, with science bordering on magic. They number 10,000 strong, and each of them is a hero. They are the...
They are
Rare is the battle where an Emperor's custodians outnumber our foes. We are ever beset, surrounded upon all sides by heresy and foulness, just as is Terra itself. Yet, like the throne world, we stand resolute, indefatigable, indomitable. Let the enemy come. Let them darken the horizon with their numbers. Still, we will prevail. Though the Emperor sits rotting on the golden throne, his talons remain sharp. The Talons of the Emperor was the name given to the most elite forces at his disposal. The left hand of his talons comes in the form of the Sisters of Silence, psychic blanks that scour the galaxy to claim souls, to fuel the Astronomicon in the form of the...
Now, going back to the previous video with the Necrons, if you happen to have watched it, and I've remembered to actually put up a link in the corner somewhere during the course of this, I mentioned that psychic blanks were used by the Necrons and quite probably were put in the genome of humanity by the original Necrons, and so the only reason these exist is potentially because the Necrons did it so that they could harvest them later and turn them into pariahs.
Great Tithe. 1,000 psychers sacrificed daily to keep the Emperor of Mankind alive, dragged into the black ships of the Silent Sisterhood. The right hand of the Emperor's protectorate, his golden bodyguards that serve him and only him. These are the custodians. While the
Except now, apparently they fucking don't. Because during the era Indomitus, there are stories of the the Primaris fleets being sent out all across the galaxy, even though apparently they're not supposed to be able to get all across the galaxy, because the maledictive, the giant warp storm that cuts the galaxy in two is supposed to be impassable apart from a couple of points here and there, but apparently not, because anybody can fucking pass it anytime they like, as long as they've got a name. These guys were on the fleets. They left Terra. They buggered off because Gilliman was like, "Hey, I need some bodyguards for my my guys that I'm sending out to everyone." And apparently these guys just went, "Yeah, all right." Either that, or I don't know if there's a story that got written somewhere where a particular one went in to speak to the Emperor and told him that his marines that he crafted had been improved upon by a tech priest of Mars and are now being sent out everywhere. And then the Emperor went, "Hey, instead of guarding me, because we've just had a warp incursion on the fucking moon, why don't you all leave and go guard these fleets?"
Members of the Space Marines went out to take back the galaxy. The Legio Custodes stood back and kept a close watch over the Emperor himself. The Custodes are, in a sense, similar to Space Marines in that they are genetically modified super soldiers clad in power armor, but that is where the similarities stop. Their genetic makeup seems to be made from the Emperor himself, or at least something quite close. And the precision of their creation predates the development of the Space Marines and even the Primarchs. Unlike Space Marine recruitment, where there's a process undertaken when a subject is at least somewhat grown, a Custodian's process begins at infancy. The methods in which they are made are a secret, but what is known is that at the very beginning, each Custodian was made by the Emperor himself. Regardless of the bioalchemical process, the process is exceptionally long and grueling, and only a handful of selected aspirants make it to the end. Those that do are clad in the most regal and effective armor in the Imperium. Commonly, a Custodian is seen carrying a Guardian Spear, an utterly yoked up version of the stabs the Praetorian Guards of the Emperor in Star Wars had. They are also clad with specific shields and blades, but the most interesting thing with all of their gear is that due to the meticulous and dedicated maintenance and preservation of their armor and gear, these items are the same ones they used 10,000 years ago. The Custodians do not age biologically, so some of the veterans in the Guard may be several thousand years old. And unlike the Space Marines, they fight entirely as a solo force. When a line of Custodians is holding back waves of enemies, they operate independently. There are no battle formations, there are no squad tactics. Each Custodian is the main character, trailed by serfs and servants.
Well, that is, if you ask me, bloody stupid. Because, you got 20 Custodians here and they're all acting independently, but the person they're going up against has got like 3,000 or 4,000 men and armored backup and a plan where he can goad a couple of them here and there, draw them off, because I guess they're so up themselves that they think they are the best thing ever. And they go, you go them off over here. And then a lucky strike through the eyepiece. Not wearing a helmet. There you are. That's 7,000 years of genetic history and warfare. He's just dead now. And then use tactics. Draw them back. Back. Provoke more. Get more of them to go off here. More of them to go off there. Eliminate them slowly, one by one. You need squad tactics. You need people to cover each other's backs, because if you don't, then and everybody thinks they're the greatest thing ever, then nobody is looking out for anybody else, and all it's going to take is one lucky hit, and then your great hero's dead, and nobody else is going to do anything and then react to it because they're all busy doing their own thing.
Servitors Tasked entirely to reload their weapons, they fight with a singular purpose, if not action. Groups of custodians will dispatch enemy after enemy, their spears coming within inches of each other, but never close enough for a killing blow. Their strikes are intentionally defensive, allowing their opponents to attack 1 to 2 times before parrying and ending their lives. Each strike deflected is an opportunity to know their enemy more and learn from their patterns. They are truly the Emperor's bodyguards, masters of close combat, enemy knowledge, and reactions measured in milliseconds.
See, there you go. Masters of close combat. Okay. If all they're doing is running around with those spears with, essentially, it is a spear with a bolt gun attached to the top of it. Bolt gun is a carbine, it's got a limited range. Just keep pulling back. They haven't got numbers to fight a full-blown army. Just keep pulling back, drawing them on, wearing them down. And then hit them with an artillery barrage.
Though the Custodians are a part of the Adeptus Terra, the members of the Guard only answer to their own leadership and the Emperor himself. The leader of the Custodians is known as the Captain General, and individual squads of Custodians are overseen by a shield captain. As their focus is on the Emperor, their command center is located within the Imperial Palace. The Tower of Hegemon serves as their primary base of operations, but there is a dedicated elite guard of Custodians known as the Companions that stands 300 strong by the Emperor's side. In total, the Custodians are 10,000 strong, and when a member retires, their name is added to the Hall of Name and vanish across the galaxy in a cloaked disguise to serve as eyes and ears for the Imperium. Despite their numbers and their strength, the members of the Custodians do not consider themselves to be soldiers or warriors in any way. They see themselves strictly as the guardians of the Emperor in all facets of his presence. This extends beyond the physical. Custodians believe they represent the guarding of the Emperor's ideals and philosophies too. Their gains are both physical and literary. They are the protectorates of everything the Emperor stood for, and in doing so, the Custodians are also artisans and scholars, in addition to being the Golden Guard of the Golden Throne. However, due to this nature of being protectorates, they have a very strong view when it comes to the Space Marines and the Primarchs. The Emperor himself had insinuated many times that once the galaxy was brought to heel, that there would be no need for the Space Marines anymore, and they were to go to...
Yeah, going back on the whole Chaos thing, this is essentially what was used to roll them all up and say that, you know, you're going to be, what, police forces? All the glorious combat you've gone through, all these heroics you've done, and you're going to be relegated to maybe peacekeeping if you're lucky.
Same way that the Thunder Warriors went before them. The Custodians were meant to be the judge, jury, and executioner of this will, and are biologically designed not only to be able to take down Space Marine with ease, but to be able to go toe-to-toe with the Primarch as well. During the Heresy, the Custodians mused on how suspiciously easy it was to kill Chaos Space Marines, as if they were trained and made for that explicit purpose. Constantine Valdor, one of the closest advisors of the Emperor, was asked if he ever disagreed with Big E on something, and he said once, with the formation of the Primarchs.
I feel I do my best, but they don't.
Let me ask you a very fair question. What do you do successfully? Quickly.
I hate that every time we're in Untucked, the conversations are about me.
And besides the trained distrust for Space Marines, the Custodians also have evidence for their distrust. The Horus Heresy saw half of the chapters fall to Chaos and turn traitor against the
Legions, but slip their tongue probably.
Emperor. In the mind of a Custodian, the fact that half of the Space Marines fell before means that the other half can fall with ease. They are fully capable of wiping out literally any force put against them, and in a sense are the final...
Except they're not, because there's only 10,000 of them. And even if they have superhuman speed on their feet. 10,000 is nothing. That is nothing on the scale of the Earth. If you think that in World War II alone there were millions of deaths, millions, and these are like 10,000. Yeah, and the legions, the Chaos Legions themselves, if they reformed, they would probably be like 10 to 100 times the amount of men that the Custodians have. They do not have the manpower. They might have the skill in one-on-one combat or one-on-squad combat, but against anybody who just looks at this formation moving towards them and goes, I'm not going to engage them on their terms, I'm just going to shell them into oblivion, they're doomed.
Representation of the golden age of terror. However, they are forced to stand in silent and blind service to the Emperor and to the ill of the Imperium. And they, for 10,000 years, have stood vigil over the Imperium and have watched its rise and fall with the inability to do anything about it. While they do go out and fight some battles here and there, at the end of the day, the vastness of the Imperium means that the closest advisors to the Emperor himself are powerless to make any change. But goddamn, can they kill a Space Marine? For 100 years, I stood my watch amidst the somber shadows of the Sanctum Imperialis. I was still as a statue, but always ready, always attuned to dangers unseen. Days, months, years passed by in a frenzied blur beyond those walls, yet within, little moved and nothing changed. For 100 years, I did not but wait, yet had any threat appeared, I would have struck it down in a heartbeat. For 100 years, I stood my watch, and as it ends, I can tell you this: patience is a weapon. Of course, a threat directly to Terra itself would appear to be something foolish. It's in the deepest parts of Imperial space and is one of the most defended bastions in the galaxy. You'd truly have to be foolhardy or insane to think that you can take on Terra itself. However, one faction certainly got close. In the dark ages of the stars and in a river of misery, there is one faction having a crackin' old time. The galaxy sees them as savages, yet they have already figured out the questions of the universe. Their numbers are uncountable, their technology incomprehensible, and yet their violence is so very green. I am, of course, talking about the
I have a thing or two to say about this. But I need to go get something to eat first and I'll come back afterwards. Right. I'm not going to go into a whole thing here at the start, but if you want to learn more about what, in my opinion, is the first major change and fleshing out of the orcs themselves, go find yourself Gorka Morka. If you can, find yourself the actual full game. If you can't, find a PDF of the other book, because that quite probably is where a lot of the newer orc ideas come from. It's from there that the notion of orcs being not as good at shooting but better in hand-to-hand combat came from, because that was the whole, you got ballistic skill 2 on your juves, well, not your juves, your youths, sorry, and higher weapon skill, and that was molded into future releases of orcs. So orcs would then come with ballistic skill 2, and so be worse at shooting but have a lot more rounds to fire. That is the first time I remember seeing any mention of an orc with ballistic skill 2, potentially outside of Mad Boys.
The orcs are the pinnacle of creation. For them, the great struggle is won. They have evolved a society which knows no stress or angst. Who are we to judge them? We Eldar who have failed, or the humans on the road to ruin in their turn? And why? Because we saw answers to questions that an orc wouldn't even bother to ask. We see a culture that is strong and despise it as crude. During the war in heaven, the old ones were doing their best to spawn as many combatants to their cause as possible by seeding the galaxy in a specialized sense. The Eldar were made to be a precise and tactical species to fight off the Catan and the Necrons, but another prominent species was made by them as well. The Krork were warriors clad in ornate armor with more dangerous weaponry. However, things changed, and these warriors changed, and the Krork are no more. They are now known as the boys, the lads, the mates, the orcs. And
I'm going to relay here a story from orc lore. It is a story that gets passed down from runt-herd to tell grots. And it is a story of the origin of the orc species. A long time ago, there were the Brain Boys. And the Brain Boys were weedy runts, but they was real smart. But their smarts came from mushrooms. And they knew that they couldn't do all the physical jobs that needed to be done. So they made the orcs. But they made them deliberately dumb, so that they wouldn't get any ideas and potentially rebel against the Brain Boys. Unfortunately for the Brain Boys, one of the orcs had an idea. And that idea came to be when he saw the Brain Boys eating the fungus and getting smarter. You see, he thought to himself, if they eat fungus and get smarter, then if I eat fungus, I get smarter. So he went to eat the fungus. And he kept eating and eating and eating until there was no fungus left. But he did not get any smarter. And when the Brain Boys returned to their caves to harvest this mushroom that would make them smarter and found that it was not there, they despaired, but they could not do anything because the orcs were bigger and stronger than them. And the mushrooms would no longer grow. And so over time, the Brain Boys got dumber and dumber and dumber until the orcs took control. And the Brain Boys are the grots.
an orc in 40k looks like an orc in most other fantasy media. Hulking, warlike monstrosities with big teeth and worse attitudes. However, unlike the more Tolkien-esque forms of these creatures, the devastating nature of the orcs is in their biology. Unlike most species in the galaxy, the orcs are actually a type of fungus. This fungus itself comes in various forms. The small goblin-like Gretchen and snotlings are a part of this fungal ecosystem as well, and
also squigs. The ecosphere, I suppose you can call it, of the orc species begins with squigs. Squigs grow first, then the snotlings will grow and harvest the squigs, and then the grots will grow and herd the snotlings, and then the orcs will grow to take advantage of everything everybody else has done.
and also the squigs, which can be used for basically anything. But regardless of what is a part of the fungal system, all of them are born from spores that land on the ground and grow. As they travel around the galaxy, they drop spores literally everywhere, and then an orc dies, and they drop tons of fungal spores that allows for their numbers to be replenished over a period of time. Because of this, orcs are not only extremely prominent across the galaxy, but they are exceptionally resilient due to their growing cycle. Even if one orc...
These here are death skulls. Take note down here, this fellow, he's a storm boy. He's an original storm boy with his Stahlhelm and his grey jacket and his sleeve with a lightning bolt on it. Does it remind you of anything that might not be British? But yeah, the Storm Boy Corps, that is where it used to be young orcs would go, because orcs, you see, orcs have a different type of youth society, whereas human youths will rebel. They'll try to find adventure, excitement, before eventually maturing into adults and leave those sorts of rebellious ideas behind for the most part. The orcs are the opposite. A youth seeks out order and discipline, and as such they are drawn to the Storm Boy Corps, where they will get relentlessly drilled until they're old enough to become a true orc and embrace chaos. But not chaos, but you know, societal chaos.
Lands on a planet, it will be nearly impossible to get rid of all of the orc presence unless the planet itself is completely destroyed. And even then, they might find a way to survive. Due to their fungal nature, orcs don't really stop growing, and the more long-lived an orc is, the bigger they get, and the more an orc fights, the bigger they get.
Kind of. Again, I think this was one of the things that was in Gorkamorka. An orc will continue to grow until it is beaten in battle, and then it will stop growing. And the one it beat it will continue to grow. And you know, in a society where the bigger you are, the more prestige you have, it is a very elegant system in that you are born to fight, and the more fights you win, the bigger you get until you're defeated, and then you stop getting big. But you will remain at that height, and so people will know, other orcs will know when they look at you, they'll go, he's a big un, so I should look up to him because he's bigger than me. And then he will have someone bigger than him, and so on and so on and so on, until you get the people at the real top.
Of course, since they're constantly getting into scraps, an orc's lifespan isn't necessarily that long, so the bigger orcs are harder to find. Though alongside this, however, they are a tribe-based species that is comprised of warbands, and the biggest and the strongest orc leads the warband known as the War Boss. At the bottom end of the orc tribal system are the Gretchens and the Snotlings. These members act as the servants and slaves of the orcs, and sometimes their actual ammunition, despite being a bit smarter and more cunning than their bigger brethren. Because in orc culture, the biggest is the boss. The smallest gets picked on and thrown around. Beyond the warbands and the tribes, orcs also belong to a specific clan. Tribes constantly shatter and rebuild, but the clans do not. They are, in a sense, a psychological state of being for any given orc, and gives an orc their specific character and traits. And to make things easier, these clans are also color-coded, so that's very easy to tell what orc does what. Though there are many clans out there, 6 of them are the most prominent and well-known. The Bad Moons are essentially the merchants and have a lot of money because their currency is teeth, and they grow teeth faster than any others. The Blood Axes are the
also bigger. The bigger the tooth, the more value it has.
Stealth units, and by stealth it means like slightly more quiet than the others, and they have a low.
Again, they can do stealth. The Blood Axes are the ones who engage in what is seen as un-orky behaviour like marching and saluting and wearing camouflage and actually engaging in ambush tactics. And they are most likely to be encountered as mercenaries. If anybody wants to hire a bunch of orcs, they're probably going to be blood axes. The moral quandary of hiring an orc is something that's probably best left elsewhere. But yeah, if you're going to hire an orc, it's probably going to be a blood axe. And when he's done with his job, somebody else might hire him to go and take you on.
For LARPing as humies, Death Skulls are the scavengers, and the Goths are the close combat specialists. And on the two ends of the spectrum, we also have the tech-savvy Evil Sons and the more traditionalist and tribal Snakebites. Another major facet of orcs is their religious beliefs. They believe in two gods, Gork and Mork. Gork is cunningly brutal and Mork is brutally cunning. The difference between them, according to orcs, is that Mork hits you when you aren't looking and Gork hits you when you are. There's a lot of confusion as to which one is which, and this results in a lot of infighting. In other species,
going back to Gorkamorka, in the lore of Gorkamorka, there was a big scrap on the planet they're on, planet of Angelus. And it revolved around essentially a rebuilt Space Hulk that the Orcs were trying to rebuild Space Hulk so they could go to the stars and join the war. And the two sides couldn't decide if it looked more like Gork or looked more like Mork. So they had a fight about it. And in the process of that fight, they smashed the Space Hulk.
This would be considered a sort of religious conflict, but for the orcs, it's just another excuse to fight. I have a quote here, but I don't really do a good orc voice, so I'm going to get my co-host of That's Ridiculous to read this one, and I'll try to lip sync it.
Oh, he's more cunning than a grot and more killy than a dread. The boys that follow me can't be beat. On Piscina, we jumped the Marine boys, and our boss pose was covered in the helmets we took from the dead-ends. We burned their port and killed their bosses, and left nothing but ruins behind. I'm Warlord Gezgul Mac Urukdraka, and I speak with the word of the gods. We's gonna stomp the universe flat and kill anything what fights back. We's gonna do this cause we're orcs, and we was made to fight and win.
It's good.
Ghazghkull, of course, may or may not actually have the voices of Gorkamork in his head, because one day he was a boy and he got a bolt around to the head and survived it, and went to, I think it was Mad Doc Grotznik, who decided to try to put him back together again. And ever since then, he's convinced that he is the prophet of his gods.
This fucking sounds terrible. Fighting is the biggest aspect of orc culture, and is essentially their life's purpose. They are genetically hardwired to get into battles and scraps with enemies that can feel pain. The more they fight, the bigger they get. This, combined with them getting bigger over time, means that some of the biggest and baddest orcs of all time have been notably gigantic. The Beast, as he was known, was about the size of an Imperial Knight. If an orc runs out of other enemies to fight, they will immediately start infighting to scratch the battle itch. For example, in The Warp, a planet exists where a band of orcs are in a constant state of war and battle, and have been for an improbably long amount of time, strictly because how much Korn enjoys himself watching it. For some,
and also because they like it. Yes, essentially there was a bunch of orcs that got lost in the warp. I think they were on a Space Hulk and it crashed, and they emerged on the planet and there was just like demons on it, and so they started having a fight, and more of them got killed over time until, you know, it whittled down, and the war boss himself was killed off. And then Korn went, well, that was a right laugh. let's do it again. And he brought all the orcs back. And the orcs were like, wow, that was a great laugh. Let's do it again.
Being trapped in a perpetual war planet for all eternity would be a fate worse than death, but to the boys, this is heaven. In the event of a particularly big battle, a massive amount of tribes and warbands will unite under what is known as the Wa. The concept of a Wa covers a few bases. The first is the group aspect of the massive green tidal wave of orcs fighting for the same cause, the cause being the second base. But the most prominent aspect of the Wa is the psychic aspect of it. Remember how the old ones made the Eldar and all the Eldar are psychic? Well, the orcs are too, kinda, but just not as much. Only a little bit of it. And they often don't know how to use it and frankly don't care. But
which is where odd boys come from. The odd boy, well, it's the weird boys really more than odd boys, because odd boys are like the mechs and docs, but it's the weird boys where they actually get the whole. They come from other weird boys and have a little bit extra warp sensitivity to them, and need to have handlers to keep them away from other orcs. There used to be in Epic, because it was never ported over to 40k as far as I can remember, but in Epic there were weird boy towers, which were battle wagons with a massive tower on top where the weird boy is stuck, because it's the safest place not only for him but for all the other boys, because he's as far away as he can get and he's not going to accidentally explode any heads.
But a huge gathering of orcs generates a psychic field that allows orcs to be more organized, dangerous, and dedicated to the war-based cause. However, the true extent of the psychic energy and its usage is relatively unknown, but that doesn't matter considering the outcome 90% of the time. In a similar sense, their ragtag technology and weaponry is also a mystery to most who encounter it purely because of that Wa energy. The technology the orcs use seem to be held together with duct tape and plastic glue, and crude doesn't even begin to describe it. Their guns seem to have an inordinate amount of ammunition and firepower, and they are seemingly able to put things together on the fly in the middle of combat. The Imperium is of the mind that the orcs' weapons and machinery only work due to their innate psychic ability, but realistically, orc gear hardly works in the first place. Weapons blow up in a Bugs Bunny-esque manner all the time, and their war buggies can collapse in the middle of battle. Just because it works a handful of times does not mean it's an effective weapon. But
there is a story, I think it was an official one, or it might have been one of these like side magazine ones, whereby or it could have even been one of the things that's just kind of general apocrypha, which was never true, but people have taken it on as being true, which was the story of a recovered orc shooter, which tech adepts took apart to find out how it worked, only to find it being pretty much an empty box with a bunch of screws inside it, and going, this should not work, yet it does. I think that is pretty much kind of the origin of the whole orc meme of, if enough of them believe something, then it will be true, which is not true. It still does kind of need to function. Just thinking, having enough boys believe that a speedster has got a full fuel tank won't make that true. It won't alter reality to a degree that that fuel tank will suddenly fill up with petrol. But it's one of those things that's kind of perpetuated around them.
This doesn't stop the orcs and their green tide. To really understand the power of the Wa energy, orcs can operate purely off of belief. Now, a misconception is that orcs believe something is real and it happens. But that isn't true, because that's just one orc. However, there's never one orc. There's normally a few billion orcs together, and if they all believe something is true, the warp will tend to respond with a positive green light. Sometimes. Do the red ones go faster? Well, with enough orcs, yeah. How does an orc buggy with...
Again, this is more of an ingrained thing. It is part of their culture that red ones go faster. So it's like 99% of the orcs across the entire galaxy believe that red ones go faster. Therefore, they do. They even actually had a rule for that on tabletop, whereby if you had a red paint job on your truck, it gained 1 inch of movement. So it did go faster, but not by any real significant degree.
With an engine block that's just a boulder with vroom vroom written in chalkwork. Who cares? Orcs breathing on a ship with a hull breach? Go ahead. An orc went back in time to kill a version of himself so he could have 2 of his favorite weapons. That's is true. Shenanigans. Yeah, exactly because true. Of their actions and aesthetic, the orcs tend to be presented in a comic relief sense in a lot of media, particularly the media from their perspective. They are bumbling and loud and goofy British football hooligans, and they say silly things and act in silly ways. But to the citizens of the Imperium, the orcs are far from funny. They are violent and irrational creatures that take humans for punching bags, slaves, or ultimately dinner. They have no moral compass and are violent and brutal killers that know nothing else. Yeah. They are genetically designed to be a violent species that was capable of beating back the Necrons and the Catan. And if the orcs were ever able to unify under one banner, they would be utterly unstoppable. However,
just before we get to the end of this segment, I'm going to say, if you don't already, go and look at Voldemort's videos, because he's got an ongoing, I believe it's still ongoing, video series from the perspective of the orcs, and it is, if I remember rightly, it is Cronan the Cunning, and it is an absolute riot.
However, due to their aggressive nature, their organizational skills are non-existent, and they tend to just beat each other up for the fun of it. All that exists in the mind of an orc is fighting, and nothing else. If they wipe out their enemies, they will inevitably wipe themselves out as well. They are a brutal Ouroboros doomed to an endless war cycle, but to an orc, why does it matter? If they fight and they win, they win. If they fight and they die, it was a good fight. Now that the
And the third one is, if they fight and run away, then they get to come back for another go.
Xenos armies are growing in strength and more are threatening the safety of the Imperium. They need to bring new methods in order to handle what they are currently facing. The Emperor is on the Golden Throne. Half the Space Marines are traitor and they are beset from enemies within and without. So now the Lords on Terra must prepare for anything possible, and sometimes the impossible. For that, they take to the stars to explore and expand. They recruit assassins for priority eliminations, they train a galactic police force and a secret police to root out any and all heresy. The lesser known, yet most feared,
Sorry, I've only just realised we're only halfway through as well, and I've been yapping a lot. Again.
I carry with me an inquisitorial seal. It is a small, unassuming object contained in a neat box of Pluvian obsidian. It is a modest thing, relatively plain, adorned with a single motif and a simple motto. Yet with this little object, I can sign the death warrant of an entire world and consign 1 billion souls to oblivion. Where the Imperium may see its justice dealt out by the hands of its armies and the gauntlets of its Astartes, when one needs eyes, ears, or both cut out, it looks to the agents of the Imperium. In a meta sense, these agents are a homogenized version of multiple factions from the original video 5 years ago. They comprise multiple aspects of the wide and all-encompassing armies of humanity and serve different roles. Whether it be the law enforcers of the Adeptus Arbites, the void-faring explorers of rogue traders, the invisible hand of the Assassinorum, or the hostile...
I know I didn't pause it at that exact time, but again, one of the things that Games Workshop was known for back in the day was obviously taking things from other settings and then putting them into theirs, because they made miniatures for many settings, and one of them was Judge Dredd, which is where the Arbites come from.
Hospitality of the Emperor's Inquisition. Each has a part to play in the God Emperor's domain. Rogue traders are a great example of a somewhat undiscussed part of the Imperium, its nobility. While you may see the General Imperium as a totalitarian hellscape, because it is, this is to those under the boot of the nobles that run it. Rogue traders are a special kind of explorer, and their existence is extremely important to the function of the Imperium. A rogue trader is often an extremely special individual and is given the monumentally sized warrant of trade, allowing them to be given almost complete and utter freedom. Their task is simple: to chart the uncharted, learn the unlearned, and do whatever they can as an explorer and conquistador for those back on Terra. This information is, strictly speaking, invaluable. Whether a sector can be settled and colonies built, or precious rare resources exist on a floating asteroid can be mined, or a long-lost Imperial world from the Age of Strife is recovered, it's all absolutely imperative. These rogue traders are faster than any other kind of Imperial armada, and therefore chart the direction of the entire society. Because of this, rogue traders are given a substantial amount of freedom. They have a ship and a crew of specialists, and can do things that would see any normal person shot. They can barter deals and even recruit Xenos races. They can explore areas strictly prohibited, and they can earn a vast amount of wealth and riches in doing so. This tends
There is a book, I think it is called Rogue Trader, which centers on a dynasty on the eastern fringe of the galaxy, a father, a son, and a daughter who encounter the Tau, and the son and the daughter both have different ideas of what to do with the Tau.
Tends to make rogue traders a very long lineage, and their heirs take up the mantle of their house. By being explorers, they become fabulously wealthy, and some can become quite the assholes while doing so. But truly, much like a night pilot, a rogue trader is an exceptionally rich individual who can back it up. They are master swordsmen, explorers, merchants, settlers, diplomats, and everything in between. They chart a course, and they set the grounds, which means they will need someone to defend them, and the prime choice for that can be the Adeptus Arbites. Now, the Arbites are cops, Judge Dredd-style cops, as their inspiration clearly shows. Each planet will have their own members of local law enforcement, and most of them will settle many of the issues there and then. But when something requires a far more in-depth peacekeeping force, the Adeptus Arbites are brought in. Think local police versus the FBI. Arbitrators in the Arbites tend to focus.
The Arbites, of course, are completely separate to the PDF, Planetary Defense Forces. The Planetary Defense Forces are the planet's army. The Arbites are essentially the, I suppose you could probably call them the military police, but they are essentially the street judges from 2000 AD.
Focus heavily on stopping crime before it can become too much of a threat. A criminal gang or heretical uprising can be subdued quickly and efficiently by utilizing them and dealing with soon-to-be criminals, as they put it. They will tap into communications, create spy networks, do interrogations and sabotage, anything that helps the good of the Imperium and the law they seek to preserve. The Code of the Arbites is laid out entirely via the Book of Judgment, a gigantic library of pages showing every single law from every single High Lord of Terra in the history of the Imperium. Because the Imperium is so vast, hundreds of laws are added every single day, and the library continues to grow with more and more laws and judgments. While Arbites themselves carry a small version called the Book of Law on their person, this does end up creating a system where the unjustly prosecuted will never escape their prisons. If an innocent is wrongly convicted, any form of legal counsel will need to go through the Book of Judgment to help get you out. Often these prisoners require hundreds of years of litigation, in which they will eventually expire before they can be deemed wrongly convicted. Innocence is irrelevant. You have been judged guilty of transgressing the Lex Imperialis. Do not compound your guilt by evading punishment, as there are greater crimes, so are there greater sentences. Of course, should something go out of the hands of the Adeptus Arbites, there is always the silent hand of the Officio Assassinorum to take their place.
The Officio Assassinorum, that of course requires the consent of several High Lords of Terror to actually put into action.
Naturally, the Imperium has assassins, and these assassins are sent to dispatch important figures that would not normally be handled by simply sending waves and waves of guardsmen at it. The Assassinorum is headed by the Grand Master of the Assassinorum, who is a High Lord of Terra and perhaps the shadiest individual in the entire galaxy. At his disposal are multiple types of assassins that all specialize in various things. Their training is extreme and absurd. Aspirant children are often subjected to Hunger Games style combat with each other on the ride over to the temple. Then you get low gravity, high pressure, traps, horrendous physical and mental strain, and everything in between. Then their minds are wiped completely and the real fun begins. An Imperial Assassin is nothing to mess around with. They are some of the fastest moving and hardest hitting things the Imperium has at hand and can go toe to toe with Space Marines depending on which temple they are from. Some, like the Vindicares, are master snipers who lie in wait for weeks, days, or even months just to get the perfect headshot from 5 kilometers away and disappear. The Calidus Temple are masters of shape-shifting and take a drug that allows them to transmute their body into whatever they see fit. A confidant of a target may be killed and they will take their place before killing their target outright. Or they could shift into a member of a Chaos Warband with symbols and flesh and all that to earn the trust of a cult leader before slitting their throat. The Caluxus Assassin is a psychic blank, a soulless mutation, making them appear as uneasy to normal humans and downright disgusting to psychers. When a powerful psycher is causing issues, this is who you send. Their specialized helmet enhances their already latent powers and will allow them to all but drain the souls from those they touch and their very body. It is an extreme weapon used when a direct...
They also have psych out grenades, which apparently are like frag grenades, but they don't actually do physical damage, they just obliterate souls.
Direct form of pressure must be applied to an otherwise untouchable psyker. Now, if you needed direct pressure in a more literal way, the Eversor is for you. A drugged up comatose psychopath that is directly dropped on enemy lines and allowed to wreak havoc, killing anything and everything it sees in a blaze of movement and blood before...
One famously took on Commander Farsight during the fourth sphere expansion. A few years back there was very much kind of a codexy thing going on, and they were trying to reunite the Tau, kind of, but also not, because Farsight is still a rebel, and they had one of them drop in on him and he cut it in half with his Dawnblade, and then the assassin laughed and exploded, and Farsight was there inside his armor and he was like, who the fuck blows up?
It inevitably dies and causes a plasma explosion on its demise. There are other temples as well. The Vanis Temple, acting as sort of like a cyber hacker. The Venomim Temple, specializing in poisons. But all in all, assassins move with their skin-tight body gloves with a speed unmatched and force unexpected. One of the best assassin novels puts a Vindicare, Calidus, and Vanis to infiltrate a night world, kill the High Monarch of the Night, who is permanently stuck in his giant robot knight, install a new ruler in his stead, and make sure nobody knows the Imperium did it. Their missions are insanity, and their tasks impossible, and they do it anyway. Thus is the power the Assassinorum wields. We do not determine the guilty, we do not decide the punishment. We are merely the cold instrument of the Emperor's vengeance. There is no form of death unknown to us. There is no form of terror beyond our means. There is no enemy outside our reach. We are the blade that hovers over the throat of the traitor. We are the bullet that awaits the heretic's skull. We are the poison in the throat of the alien. However, despite the prowess of the traitors, the police, and the assassins, there is one that stands above all. As the Imperium settled into its post-Emperor world, they needed a force to root out corruption wherever it could be found. But they needed specialized individuals who could do so. Men and women who would serve as detective and executioner. This new secret police would have unlimited authority, and they would be known as the Inquisition. Inquisitors of the Inquisition are one of the most feared individuals in all of the galaxy for the common members of humanity. Trained in the most difficult of conditions and mental hardening, they have long closed their minds to the compassions of those they deem guilty. Inquisitors are, for the most part, detectives, but they are detectives whose authority is unmatched and actions justified by the state itself.
There's also two types of Inquisitor as well, generally speaking. There's the conservative and the radical. Well, they're not actually called the conservative, but you know, it's the same basic thing. It's like those who follow the teachings, and those who think the teachings are more kind of guidelines, potentially outdated. For example, a Ordo Xenos Inquisitor, one who is more kind of on the Puritan side of things, would say all aliens must be killed, all alien technology must be destroyed. Whereas a radical would say aliens and alien technology can be utilized for the express purpose of further elimination of other aliens. So an Ordo Xenos would say, I can use a shuriken catapult because I'm using that to further the goals of the Inquisition in eliminating dangerous aliens.
Similar to the KGB, the Gestapo, the Stasi, the OVRA, but unlike those organizations, the Inquisition has far more authority and is one of the only types of individuals who can commit exterminatus, the term used for the utter and total destruction of a planet that is no longer deemed usable by the Imperium. While it is a very exciting word and a commonly notable thing done in Warhammer, exterminatus is not actually used particularly often. It's a last resort entirely meant to stop the enemy from gaining a major foothold or spread even more corruption. Even with 1 million worlds, the wholesale slaughter of an entire planet is still a massive blow to the Imperium. Inquisitors range quite a bit, not just in how they operate, but also in their personalities. They are often main characters for a large amount of books, as detective noir is a great...
It's a squat. Not a fucking Votan. It's a squat.
Genre, and they can be the most stone-cold killer or a pragmatic and sympathetic individual depending on who they are. Radical Inquisitors may utilize methods unlike most of the Imperium, such as alien tech or even demon hosts, where Puritans stick closer to the methods of the religious state and shun any deviations. They also specialize in various aspects, as the Inquisition has orders or ordos, such as Xenos for aliens, Malleus for demons, and Hereticus for, you guessed it. Truly, if you are a normal citizen of the Imperium, a person flashing an inquisitorial rosette in front of you may be one of the most terrifying moments of your entire life. It is the same as an...
There is a story of... I think it was a short story that is essentially people living in their houses terrified of the Inquisition, because it's like, have you given benediction to the Emperor enough that day? If you have not, by their evaluation, then you are a heretic and deserving of death.
FBI badge or a KGB member, except now you're in Warhammer. So their authority and tools are infinite. Agents of the Imperium are vast and offer a ton of different concepts to the world of Warhammer, and they continue to expand as the Emperor's descent into the Golden Throne has lasting effects on humanity. As time progressed, a few people seeing the Emperor as a deity made their voices louder, and over a few thousand years, worship of the Emperor was not only considered expected, but state mandated. This church will be known as the Ecclesiarchy, and there were many who would look to the cardinal position and make desperate grabs at their power,
The Imperial
leaving
cult.
horrid effects on the populace. The Age of Apostasy was a time of reformation in the Imperium that saw its eventual change into an overtly religious empire. During this time, an all-female warrior cult to the Emperor called the Daughters of the Emperor were a bit more isolated from the wider Imperium. However, as the ecclesiarchy began to take root, one Gorbz Van Dyer became the High Lord of the Administratum and noticed these warriors and felt they could be useful to him. Gorbz himself told these warriors that he was the voice of the Emperor himself and demanded they fire upon him to prove it. Having a little hidden force field that this warrior cult
Specifically a conversion field.
had never seen before, the bullet bounced off of him.
It didn't bounce off, it was a flash of light, and he remained unharmed because it was a conversion field generator.
And showing him to be unharmed, truly blessed by the Emperor. This cult became known as the Brides of the Emperor and acted as his personal bodyguards
and political favour pawns for anybody he deemed to be useful to him. Whatever favour the ally determined that the bride should be, whatever purpose they should be put to was their decision. But yes, they were traded for political favour.
AIDS. However, Gorbz Van Dyer was a tyrant, and his horrendous reign spelt ruination for the wider Imperium, which made the Adeptus Custodes take notice. Despite an outright coup and revolt against him, the deadlock was getting steep as the Brides of the Emperor's fierce combat skills kept him safe. One Custodian made contact with the leader of the Brides and brought her into the throne room of the Emperor himself. Nobody knows what transpired in that room, save for Alicia Dominica, the Custodian, and the Emperor himself. However, she left the room with her hair bleached pure white from the interaction, marched her battle brides to...
I don't know if that was actually Alicia, because there was only one of the what would become the Sister of the Battle that actually had hair bleached white, and her order followed suit. I can't remember which order it was, but there was only one that actually did that. But Games Workshop being Games Workshop, everybody has white hair. If you're a Sister of Battle, you got white hair.
Directly to Van Dyer himself and said, "You have committed the ultimate heresy. Not only have you turned your back on the Emperor and stepped from his light, you have profaned his name and almost destroyed everything he has striven to build. You have perverted and twisted the path he has laid for mankind to tread. As your decrees have stated, there can be no mercy for such a crime, no pity for such a criminal. I renounce your lordship. You walk in the darkness and cannot be allowed to live. Your sentence has been long overdue, and it is now time for you to die." Despite not having any time to die, Gorbz Van Dyer found some time.
Yes, because his response to that was, "I don't have time to die, I'm too busy."
To do so. With his head lopped clean from his body, the Brides of the Emperor were no more, and the ecclesiarchy signed a document to stop Van Dyer's reign from happening again. They would no longer be allowed to have men under arms. Men.
Don't you love legal loopholes? Men under arms, yeah, well, they're not men. We can get away with it.
The Adeptus Sororitas, or commonly known as the Sisters of Battle, the nuns with guns, the fighting force of the church. Despite being the main militant faction, the Sisters of Battle, their organization actually is far more diverse than this and have many more nun-based roles for their members. They are organized by various orders with various specialties in mind, such as the non-militant orders like the Hospitaller, Dialogus, and Familius, including things like helping with surgical equipment and various other medical stuff, Duolingo, and a poli-sci degree. These orders are further separated into smaller orders in an almost Space Marine chapter sense, but tend to have more flexibility due to the nature of their work. And in addition to that, there is flexibility between the orders. It is not uncommon for a member of one of the more battle-hardened orders to switch to a more passive one once they sustain battlefield injuries or are a bit closer to retirement. As mentioned before, the Sisters of Battle are a part of their own separate organization, the Order's Militant, and feature the highest number of any given sister. They are the official fighting force of the Ecclesiarchy, and they specialize in wars of faith. Unlike the deployment of Astartes and Guardsmen, the Sisters of Battle are often deployed with members of the Inquisitorial Ordo Hereticus due to the holy war nature of their battles. The Sisters of Battle are suited up with their own form of specialized power armor that gives them almost like a Joan of Arc vibe to the battlefield. Though lacking the more extreme modifications of a Space Marine's power armor, mainly to the fact that Sisters are, for the most part, regular humans, the power armor of a Sister of Battle almost matches the defensive power of an Astartes, but with added flexibility and versatility in exchange for its strength. Some of the patterns of armor do allow for the enhancing of genetics, but this is far from the norm. This, combined with an arsenal of tanks and vehicles that have literal church organ rocket launchers on them.
I had one of these. I actually had one of these as an original the original one, of course, not this plastic one. It was a plastic rhino base with metal pulpit, metal organ on the back here, a servitor, I believe it was like loading ammo in there, and sister playing. Really very heavy because all this part here was just pure metal. And it was a nightmare to actually keep in one piece.
Really brings across the holy war vibe in a gothic manner. Accompanying a Sister of Battle in the fields of war is the holy trinity of weaponry, the bolter, the flamer, and the melta. With such a simple loadout, the Sisters of Battle are able to bring down the glorious flames of the Emperor himself, and his holy light shines on them in other ways during a conflict. Hell, even their jump packs evoke angelic imagery as opposed to the more clunky jetpacks ones that Space Marines have. In times of great turmoil or impossibility, a living saint of the sororitas itself might appear on the battlefield surrounded by a litany of doves and cherubs, an almost comical scene of holy glory followed by literal hellfire.
It is quite probable that the living saints are demons, but imperial demons, because faith is a weapon and faith has an impact on the warp, and if you have ardent enough believers, then the warp will respond. And over 10,000 years, there's a lot of faith has been built up, and not limited just to these ladies here. Also in the Gathering Storm books, there was a incident on Cadia where the Living Saint appeared, and when the pylon network was activated with the aid of the Necrons, everything that was non-physical was hit by it, including the Living Saint.
Sisters are a fascinating organization because they take what is normally seen as a benevolent force and turn it on its head to be a horrifying method of war. Because the Sisters are so zealous, they are nigh impossible to persuade and almost never fall to chaos. In fact, any deviation from the Imperial faith may see you...
Yes, never fall to chaos, except for that one that actually did, and I think fell to corn.
Killed outright as you are deemed a heretic, and sometimes Sisters have even less patience than the Inquisition does. To the Adeptus Sororitas, no punishment is too extreme for blasphemy and heretical behavior, whether it's lobotomizing traitors to use as shock troops or attaching them physically to agonizing pain engines so they can die for the Emperor. anything goes. The most fascinating part of the sisters, however, is their faith. We discussed how orcs often make things happen through belief because of their sheer number of them. The sisters create miracles where they walk. They are not many psychers like orcs, but they are excessively devout and make up for that. Bullets barely miss targets they absolutely should hit. Guns jam, tanks malfunction, enemies slip and fall. The scene from Pulp Fiction is an accurate portrayal of what happens when the sisters fight.
I'd knock that shit off if I was you.
Die, you motherfucker!
One of the most prominent figures is the Triumph of St. Catherine, a literal open casket with the saint of a sister's order held aloft by lobotomized servant cherubs and protected by bodyguards of the faithful. The devotion to the emperor swells so strong that acts of faith are made manifest, and sometimes angels themselves. When the sisters go to war, they have thundering organs and litanies screeching out into the battlefield, hymns and songs. They rabble off prayers on their lips and burn holy fire across the area. They spray holy water down from horns atop their vehicles. It is a genuine holy war, a procession of death.
Yeah.
Saint Celestine is an undying deity, arriving precisely where she is needed and returning to the fold after each death. When she dies, she sees a crying young girl atop a mountain of bones. Her bones, after every one of her deaths. She climbs this mountain every time to help comfort this crying child and is rebirthed upon the battlefield. And one day, her deaths will create a mountain so large that even she will not be able to traverse it. Is she a demon of the God Emperor?
Yes.
Perhaps, but she'll be shot for saying so. She is genuinely and literally faith made manifest. Some sisters may make a mistake, however.
And what is faith made manifest, if not a demon?
And find themselves questioning their faith, disobeying a command, and even leaving their order. These sisters are sent for reconditioning and are known as the Sisters Repentia. They generally face the front of the line head on and seek retribution and forgiveness from the Emperor himself. Though their actions were heretical, repentia on the fields of battle is an indication of an individual wanting to become forgiven. They run aloft with torture devices attached to their bodies and a chain sword the size of their body, completely armorless, to determine if this is how they die or if the Emperor will forgive them. Even the most famous champion of the sisters, that Saint Celestine, was a repentia. Even she questioned her faith. And if she can do it, so can you. Just don't run away again. They don't really do third chances. The Sisters of Battle are martyrdom-enthused zealots that create miracles in their tread. Their devotion is boundless and also a direct source of their power. A whole army of power-armored soldiers shooting, burning, and melting all in their path is bad enough, but it enters a whole different level when God is on your side. By bolter shell, flamer burst, and melta blast, the mutant, the heretic, and the traitor alike are cleansed of their sin of existence. So has it been for 5 millennia, so shall it be until the end of time. The Imperium devolving into wars of faith is to push its agenda further. Where the xenophobic nature of humanity was once strong, it has now been magnified, and there are plenty of aliens in this galaxy. 6,000 years prior to the current events of 40K, a planet was found by an AdMech exploration vessel. The life forms on the planet were seen using tools, but they were still very primitive, so the planet was marked for destruction to pave the way for the Imperial War Machine. However, this was thrown off because of an extreme warp storm and that whole Doge Van Dyer thing. Flash forward to modern day, and an unknown but highly advanced vessel was shot down near an Imperial mining world, and the bodies on this vessel matched those life forms found on that primitive world. The native creatures on that planet were able to evolve rapidly due to them being unobstructed, and their highly advanced gear posed a new threat to the Imperium. Advancing over these years with a remarkable speed, these are the new upstarts in the galaxy, looking to make a name for themselves, all in the name of the greater good. These are the... The alien is not intrinsically evil. Do not hate him. Pity him his ignorance. Seek to understand his differences and acquaint him with his inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good.
Unless you're an orc, because they tried. They tried several times. Until they eventually came to the conclusion that maybe they can't actually be integrated into the greater good. So let's kind of avoid them wherever we can.
The early history of the Tau is chaotic at best. Due to their extreme speed run to space travel, their journey to the stars were overburdened with inner conflict. It wasn't until the appearance of the Ethereals that things began to settle. These Tau to the warring tribes...
The ethereal appearance is an odd one because it's explicitly described that the Ethereals looked the same. They were identical to each other when they appeared, and it was essentially during the final confrontation between the Plains Tau and the Mountain Tau. Although I think there was like the Water Tau and the Flight Tau were there as well, but essentially the Plains Tau are the Fire Warriors, and they have been going around genociding everybody else.
Marked their unification under one common belief: the greater good of the Tau Va.
What about the greater good?
The greater good.
How can this be for the greater good?
The greater good.
This system is a caste-based system that seeks to unify and organize the Tau into an effective and successful society while working for their mutual benefit. These castes, in order from lowest to highest, are the Fire or Shas caste, which is soldiers, Earth/Theo, which is manufacturers and industrialists, the Water or Hor, being diplomats and traders, and the Air/Kor, being navy officers. Also you have the Ethereal/Un, which is the lords and leaders of the Tau. Now, unlike the paths of the Eldar, the Tau don't get any say into which caste they're in. It's determined upon birth due to inheritance from a parent.
That's generally how caste systems work, yes. You are born into a caste. You live in that caste, and you will die in that caste. You are not allowed to have any relationships outside of your caste.
Trying to deviate from your caste or trying to do tasks or even use tools assigned to another caste is a grievous crime against the Ethereals, and those guilty of this crime tend to be sent to re-education camps, which sounds not so greater good, but a greater good than the good that the Imperium sees as greater. The guidance of the greater good also encourages the growth of the Empire through the absorption of other races and cultures. The expansion of the Tau Empire is split into spheres of time. So far, there have been 5 spheres of expansion, with a 6th one being planned in the current timeline. The first 2 spheres saw the Tau move beyond their homeworld and settle new planetary systems, known as Seps, and absorb multiple races into their ranks. But the 3rd sphere is where we see the Tau interact with the Imperium for the first time, which went about as well as you think it did. The Tau, as mentioned before, are highly advanced compared to some of the other species in the galaxy, and their military tactics are highly precise. Instead of the Imperial methodology of throwing everything at a problem, the Tau carefully assess any battle and take as many precautions as possible. Commonly, you will see a Tau warrior in a heavily modified battle suit with advanced targeting systems. The Tau do not often consider close combat to be something very effective,
and yet in pretty much all the artwork Tau appear in, they're in close assault with somebody, generally so that you can see that Tau getting murdered. Because if you actually had a proper artwork of the Tau, you would have like a Tau firing line and then a big open space of not a lot on the canvas, and then the people they're shooting at.
so they don't really put much stock into it. Their Gundam-like battlesuits have a multitude of functionality, ranging from overwhelming firepower to stealth-based combat, and since they're an upstart species with a bit of technical flair, they have plenty of AI drones that help them in the field of battle. In addition to this, the Tau are also joined in the field of battle by some of the species that have been absorbed into the fold of the greater good. These auxiliaries often employ tactics that the Tau are unable to do on their end, such as the brute force and almost primitive nature of the Kroot, combined with the Geonosian aerial shock attack style of the Vespens. But the Tau assimilate more and more species with time, including even some humans who wish to break off from the Imperium for, pick a reason. The aesthetic of the Tau,
The primary reason being it's the Imperium.
also leans a bit more into the East Asian sci-fi aesthetics. The large mech suits definitely evoke that Gundam look, but the general garb of their higher-ups kind of create that motif, and they often have accents in the games that they are in. But while Tau are looked at as Gundam mech faction by some, others enjoy them for the full coalition of aliens. One of my favorite images in Warhammer is this official artwork by Games Workshop. Now, not a single one of these aliens are a faction in Warhammer, and yet they all are different species that do exist in this universe.
This is an interesting one, because that appeared in fan animation. That appeared in Astartes, the fan animation.
The Milky Way galaxy is vast, and while the Imperium and many others exterminate what they can find, the Tau will assimilate those that can be assimilated. The Kroot and Vespens we already discussed, and the humans and also Voton will join them at times, but you also have the Galg, the Nigasar, the Vorg, the Thraxian, the Terrellian, Greet, Domati, and many others. Some of these are just one-off lines, and some are major players in the civilization. The Nigasar are, for lack of a better word, gigantic psychic polar bears with bird-like faces. The Tau have psychic bears, and the fact I haven't seen this is a crime. The Tau as a culture are generally marred by the various issues that an advanced civilization would have in an unadvanced galaxy. They do not travel through the warp because of the insane dangers, but instead use a more classic FTL jump. However, because they aren't going through hell, it makes them a lot slower than many other races. The Imperium might surf through hell and lose a few ships, but they will get there first. Often they will take enormous cannons and weaponry and defeat their foes before they can even close the gap. One of their light walkers carried a weapon of lethal effect. It fired a form of ultra-high velocity projectile. I saw one of our tanks after being hit by it. There was a small hole punched in either flank. One, the projectile's entry point, the other its exit. The tiny munition had passed through the vehicle with such speed that everything within the hole not welded down had been sucked out through the exit hole, including the crew. We never identified their bodies, for all that remained of them was a red stain upon the ground, extending some 20 meters from the wreck. The fascination of the Tau is that in any other modern day world, their society would be horrid. Rigid caste systems, corruption, and politicking ethereals, and basically it's the greater good or nothing at all. But in the world of Warhammer, the simple fact that humans are accepted into their sphere should they please already puts them far and above the other races that would murder or eat them. But despite this, the existential dread that is the Tau Empire is ever so apparent. Despite being hyper advanced and welcoming a coalition of aliens, they are the upstarts, and they are painfully outnumbered on all sides. Almost any other faction in the universe, given the right amount of force, can wipe out the Tau Empire from existence. They themselves might not be perfect, but their slight glimmer of hope is exactly that, a glimmer in a dark and crushing galaxy. Of course, nobody dares take the attempt to destroy the Tau Empire, because doing so is an enormous amount of resources, and for the same reason why you don't full send your whole army to one person in a commander game of Magic. You open yourself up to player 2 and 3. But not to say it won't be a struggle. The Tau Empire, when prepared, are a vicious fighting force who might delete your formation before you even see them. But they lack numbers, and in the dark corners of the galaxy, something is coming that is entirely numbers.
Everybody's favourite bug boys. Again, I've not got a lot to say on them other than, remember, they have squigs too.
There is a cancer eating at the Imperium. With each decade, it advances deeper, leaving drained, dead worlds in its wake. This horror, this abomination, has thought and purpose that functions on an unimaginable galactic scale, and all we can try to do is stop the swarms of bioengineer monsters it unleashes upon us by instinct. We have given the horror a name to salve our fears. We call it the Tyranid race. But if it is aware of us at all, it must only know us as prey.
And this is one of the things that really irked me with modern-ish lore, because somebody in the Games Workshop writing team decided that what would be a really good thing to do is to have this vast galactic spanning collective consciousness that goes all the way from the smallest microbe up to the biggest bioships, and have them specifically hate Blood Angels. Blood Angels should be insignificant, maybe a slight irritation, not a, oh, we really hate those pink food in red tins, oh, really hate them. No, fuck off with that.
The conflicts of Warhammer 40k are chaotic enough with the sheer volume of violence that exists in the confines of the Milky Way. However, there is a threat to the galaxy that extends beyond our known galaxy that is creeping ever closer and cannot be negotiated with. What drew them to the galaxy is unclear. It may have been the light of the Astronomicon itself, like a moth to a flame. It could have been a Xenos device detonated in the Horus Heresy. It could have been that they were done eating the Andromeda galaxy and they have come to take ours, or they might be running from something far, far worse.
The truth is, it doesn't matter. They're here.
Regardless of the why, the where, when it came to the first official contact with these creatures, was the planet of Tyran. This is the site where the Imperium encountered
some original artwork. Well, I say almost original artwork. I believe that was probably from either Advanced Space Crusade or Tyranid Attack.
Fleet of these creatures before being utterly torn to shreds. Thus, these creatures became known as the Tyranids. There is plenty of evidence that the Tyranids have been lurking in our galaxy for years beforehand, but this was the first true instance of their presence being fully known. Unlike other creatures in the realm of 40k that can be talked to, captured, or negotiated with, the Tyranids are unable to be reasoned with. They are, at their core, animals, but not the fun kind of animals. They are the xenomorphs of 40k, and
curiously, though, they did have Zotes, and Zotes have been identified as a potential diplomatic subspecies within the greater Tyranid swarm, because they were seen in the galaxy before the Tyranids, as they were identified, arrived on Tyran, or Tyran, and they were later seen within the actual Hive fleets themselves.
Boy, are they hungry! They are instinctively hardwired to either kill or be killed, and they are an unrelenting force due to this. However, just because they don't talk outwardly doesn't mean they don't communicate with one another. The true horror of the Tyranids is found in their driving force, the hive mind.
3, 2, 1.
Hot in here by Nelly.
That's what I guessed. What?
You see, the Tyranids are a collective consciousness that are all connected to a singular embodiment of psychic power that is utterly incomprehensible to the human mind. To keep this connection there, the Tyranids on the field of battle are followed around by synapse creatures, essentially serving as their Bluetooth connection to the greater hive mind. This allows them to send and receive information about the battle they're in, and it also allows them to adapt to certain situations based off of the information gained. Depending on the enemy, the swarm might be able to develop a new weapon or new tactics so they can get the upper hand. When the synapse connection is cut, they are unable to essentially form a save state and are stranded. The sheer power of the hive mind presence pours from each Tyranid in such a manner that it causes a distortion in the warp itself. A hive fleet's arrival can cause cause a dark shadow the size of several light years, coined the shadow in the warp. This shadow prevents any usage of the warp, or at least makes it exceptionally difficult. Communications shut down due
and yet they still have confrontations with demons. You have to have confrontation with demons because, see, demons are a faction, and tabletop you've got to have demons be able to fight Tyranids, because one person has bought a demon army, another person's bought a Tyranid army, and they must be able to fight on the tabletop. So therefore, the shadow and the warp, it blocks out and essentially destroys the Psyker's mind just through the sheer volume and number of voices in there that prevents them from having a kind of a proper access to the warp, and disrupts it in its entirety. Yet demons are not affected by it unless they are, but then maybe they're not, because you got to let them be able to fight on the tabletop. And in fact, the last time I actually read a Tyranid Codex where they had the specific demon hunting or demon fighting, hunting really, swarm, their special rule was absolutely shit when it came to anything. I think it was like within 12 inches there's a +1 difficulty when trying to use warp abilities. I was like, what? This is total bollocks.
Due to astropaths being unable to talk, ships cannot freely enter the warp, and even creatures with a warp sensitivity feel an immense dread due to it. It causes everything to just kind of sit dead, like at a buffet counter waiting for the afternoon meal rush. The Tyranids meander through the galaxy in these giant...
Hi, Philippe Behemoth here, first one to turn up. Obviously stopped technically at Macragge, although splinters of it came off, and there is the old One Eye, which is part of that fleet, which it still exists. High Fleet Kraken, I think, was the next one. Gorgon is a fairly new one. It's Hydra, which is the ones that are these blue ones coming out from beneath the galactic plane. Ghoul Stars, that's where my Space Marine chapter's located. They're having a lot of fun over there. And yeah, there's as I say, the demon fighting one that's somewhere in the Great Rift now, because the Great Rift kind of went from here over like to here, and then down like that or something, and they're around there somewhere.
Gigantic hive fleets that are fueled by bioships, and these ships contain birthing pools for Tyranid armies and more ships. Everything about the Tyranids is organic, and to fuel this war machine, the Tyranids consume any and all biomass they come across and absorb it into their respective hive. From the ground to literally the air, the Tyranids strip a planet to a lifeless and uninhabitable hulk. As a means to curb the advancement of the Tyranids, the Imperium has been known to preemptively exterminatus worlds in the path of a hive fleet so that they have less biomass to consume in an attempt to starve them.
Thank you, Inquisitor Cryptman.
The Halo method, literally scorched earth tactics by taking everything out of the freezer and lighting it on fire. Outside of the obvious threat and adaptive and unreasonable enemy posed on the field of battle, the most dangerous aspect of the Tyranids comes in the form of their general unpredictability. The Tyranids are external to the Milky Way galaxy itself, and it's unknown where they truly hail from. However, their arrival in the Milky Way is seemingly random and in 3D space, implying quite heavily
because space is actually space is 3D. Imagine that. Everything in 40k is very much kind of, here's a 2D plane, because it's easier to have it on a map and go 2D plane. You go here, you go here, you go, which is why fortress worlds are done, because you go, oh, this location around this fortress world here, that's protected by the fortress world, without anybody going, oh yeah, but what if you just go over it or under it? Because you can do that in space.
The Tyranids have the galaxy surrounded in some kind of way. Due to this, you will sometimes see instances of species engaged in a separate conflict, both agree to a temporary truce in order to take out a Tyranid threat. Because regardless of the stakes at hand, The existence of the Tyranids marks the heat death of the galaxy itself, and all the factions can ultimately agree that the Tyranids themselves act as the biggest threat to all of them. The Tyranid race is truly an unknowable horde, and pulls from that horror of the unknown. They, as a faction, are not ones with a large amount of general lore because their entire race is told from the point of view of those being eaten by them. Tyranids are called that due to the planet Tyran they destroyed, as we mentioned earlier, and their names are often phrases given to them by their victims. The Swarm Lord, Old One-Eye, the Death Leaper, Von Ryan's Leapers, and so on. Despite
the Doom of Malantai, the name that was given to it because it killed the Wraith ship Malantai and all the Eldar on board because it got into the Infinity Circuit and feasted.
Despite the inability to even perceive the vast psychic hive mind of the Tyranids, they are fiercely intelligent. Special poisons and items designed to counter them are adapted in a matter of hours. If you bring light infantry, they create heavy monsters. If you brought weapon emplacements, they spawn little creatures to scour your vents and sewers.
They also use germ warfare. That was one of the things in second edition. When the Codex came out, they said if your opponent uses battle tactics, battle tactics cards from the Dark Millennium box set, then you get to roll on tables, and some of them were literally just like germs have gotten inside people and eaten them.
Many of you enjoyed the Servitor excerpt from part 1, and so bear with me as I provide you another very long account of a planetary governor whose planet is in the final death throes of the Tyranid menace. This starts about halfway through. It has been many weeks since a handful of us escaped the sinking of the Seafort Divine Anchor via airlift. We have escaped in this manner because the Tyranids had overwhelmed so much of our world, they no longer appeared to need to continue spawning beasts for aerial supremacy. I shall never forget what I saw from my craft's portholes. Alien biostructures dominated Huto's surface. Gigantic, lumpen barnacles pumped out clouds of matter to further poison the planet alongside pulsating, brain-like nodes that resembled lethal fungi. Immense capillary towers stretched high into the poisoned sky. The glistening chitin coating their flanks crawled over by chains of lesser beasts fulfilling some sick alien purpose I cannot know. Digestion pools spread for miles, replacing our once great lakes with reservoirs of bubbling biomatter. Tides of creatures bloated with consumed flesh vomited their guts into the pools or threw themselves entirely into the billowous liquid. Amidst the seas of feeder beasts consuming all in their path, we would every so often see an explosion or a burst of fire. Were these heroic final stands by other survivors, or merely abandoned ordnance detonating at random? I will never know. I cannot rejoice in the deaths they inflicted. The biomatter of the dead Xenos was surely recycled by the Xenos regardless in no time at all. Our aircraft ran out of fuel a week ago. Now I stand in the snow, not far from the peak of Mont Saint Hilaire. I am the only one left that I know. One by one, those with me perished. The slightest cut on a mountain rock resulted in an immediate infection that left the pilot screaming in agony. Her co-pilot fired the shot that ended her torture, and my senior aide threw himself from a ledge, the reality that there was no escape hitting him. I have no idea what happened to my chief medicae. Others were slain by lone beasts the rest of us were unable to kill or drive away. A justly deserved end will soon be mine. I have failed on every possible level. We were not even able to send word. An alien disease has me within its grasp. My limbs are numb, my tongue is dry as sand, my head throbs. Even at these chilled heights, I sweat profusely. From here where I sit, I can see the final death unfold on the planet entrusted to me. Before me is the Radarin Ocean. The water level is visibly dropping, hour by hour. They are even taking our seas. There are enormous beasts with great, slowly flapping wings and immense open maws moving through the sky. I may be at high altitude, but the air is thinner here than it should be. I know enough of mountaineering to know that. They will not even leave our air. There is an isthmus I can see, upon which is sat one of the Xenos capillary towers. Now I believe I can tell what they are truly for. High up, foul Xenos bioships cling to their flanks like twisted calves at their mother's udders. They are feasting, I am sure, hungrily filling themselves to burst on the hideous gruels that are what remains of my people. I have witnessed the planet's death from sinister start to hideous conclusion. I see the power of our foe, and though I have shown boundless weakness these past months, I do not see how we could ever have won. If this is any sort of good news, it seems that one thing that might be an inadvertent repellent effect on the Tyranids is chaos. Chaos and chaotic energies offer no nourishment to the Tyranids, they cannot eat that. And the presence of rifts and warp storms work as a means to starve out the Tyranid fleet. The Tyranids, of course, are attempting to adapt to this, but it seems that even at the most primal core of the galaxy itself, Chaos agrees that these dinner guests are not welcome in any way, shape, or bioform. In the end, though, the Tyranids represent the final fears of the galaxy itself. Despite the goals to conquer the galaxy as a whole, the remainder of the universe may very well be dead and derelict space. Instead of endless worlds and solar systems, it may just be bones and ash. The tendrils of the hive mind have wrapped themselves around the galaxy, and the only thing that's guaranteed is that dinner is served. However, the Tyranids are not simply the unending hordes of bugs. Beyond the more general buffet tactics of the force of the Tyranids, the hive mind has a more secretive and dangerous means of planetary conquest in the form of something a bit more terrestrial. General upheaval and revolution. However, though the idea of a societal revolt for the good of the populace is an admirable thing, these leaders have the nefarious intent of the hive mind itself. These are the downtrodden and the oppressed, the revolutionaries to a better cause, the heralds of the Star Children. These are the...
They're what the Imperium cultivates, and sometimes will just leave alone because they go, well, sure, they may be revolutionaries, they may be demagogues out here preaching, and yes, the Emperor they say they worship is a little bit odd, but by gum, the extraction quotas have gone up 600% since they appeared, so we're gonna leave them alone.
In the sunless body of our hive, the flock of the faithful grows. We are guided by our great Father's sacred vision, protected by his loving hands. Within these holy shadows we dwell, while the impure bathe in spire-topped starlight. And what lies between those stars? What sails beyond those distant suns? Shrouded in night, born within that eternal black, our redeemers, our gods, truer than the silent, long-dead emperor, the children of the void. We hear them in our dreams, we feel them in our blood. They call and we will answer. We will rise and claim the engines of labor that have bound us in servitude. This world will burn. It will be cleansed, purified, made ready, and the heavens will deliver our reward.
Now, it has been said that cultists, Brood Brothers specifically, and others, while they're within the a local hive mind, occasionally that will be lifted once the Tyranids have arrived, and once everything has been destroyed and is ready for consumption. Why, I don't know, because it seems to be that the Tyranids will just get some perverse pleasure in going, ha ha ha, look at you, you thought you were going to free yourselves and now you're also on the table, ha ha ha, stupid idiots. So I don't put much stock in that notion, but it is one that has been floated out there as it can happen.
The ground zero of a Gene Stealer cult comes in the form of the Gene Stealer itself, deep In the depths of a planet, a Gene Stealer acts as almost an advanced recon unit for the Tyranids, and were the first Tyranid units encountered by the Imperium itself long before the first Hive fleet made its presence known. Unlike the Tyranids that can only reproduce through the birthing pools in the fleet, a Gene Stealer reproduces via the Big Smooch. The Gene Stealer kiss is essentially what the facehugger alien does. It attaches to a victim and releases an embryo. However, instead of a chest burster, the embryo alters the genetic makeup of the host itself, turning it into the primary conductor of a localized version of the hive mind known as the brood mind. Any offspring that this host produces is known as a Gene Stealer hybrid, and the host assures their survival to continue to reproduce. The first few generations of a Gene Stealer hybrid look more like the Gene Stealer itself, which in our current reality would be terrifying, but considering how the vast majority of humanity is a little mutated in 40k, it doesn't stand out as much as it should. As the generations continue, the mutations and the general alien look is almost entirely phased out, and the resulting hybrids look almost identical to the species that they once were. Due to the size of most worlds, the makings of a Gene Stealer cult can exist almost entirely in secret, generation after generation. After a certain period of time, those hybrids will make their way into generalized society. Still connected to the mind of the Gene Stealer itself, the hybrids operate with the express goal of gaining power within society.
It should also be noted that the final generation of hybrid come out like pure strains.
Itself in a political and religious sense. Most of the time, they will present themselves as revolutionaries, looking for the betterment of the population. And honestly, it sounds great for a lot of the folks on the planet. By the people, for the people. As they expand more openly, the crossbreeding continues until all aspects of the planet's society is infiltrated. However, all bets are off when a hive fleet comes close enough. When a Tyranid hive fleet gets close enough to a planet, the brood mind activates essentially an endgame scenario. The once political and religious leaders become bloodthirsty fanatics that work to finalize the collapse of society and the death of those who oppose them. But to those in the brood mind, the god they believe in is coming, and this is holy justice and vindication for their religious and political beliefs. As the hive arrives, the planet is essentially ripe for the taking. The original Gene Stealer pieces out to the next world or is reabsorbed for deployment elsewhere, and the Tyranids begin to take the planet for themselves. The cultists
Go look up the original Patriarch miniature, because that ain't going nowhere very fast. It is very fat on a palanquin. Very fat indeed.
Sing praises and holy songs as the Tyranids begin to eat everything up in kind of a meet the pyro sense of religious delusion. But as they are harvested, some of them are snapped back to reality, oops, there goes gravity, before they are thrown into the biomass soup. For a fleeting second, they see that this was all a ruse to consume the world and that their false gods were a bunch of hungry bugs. The cultists essentially put the checkerboard dining cloth on the table for them and invited them for a feast. Due to the constant redeployment of Gene Stealers, there are known cults that pop up across the Imperium itself. Some of the more well-known ones are the Cult of the Bladed Cog or the Rusted Claw, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different cults that keep popping up all over the galaxy as the Gene Stealers spread. And due to their covert means taking over the planet, they are not generally viewed to be a threat until it is far too late. And due to the know-how of Gene Stealers, they tend to be predatory to those in the lower classes of a given planet. The Gene Stealer cults overall have really come into their own, commercially and artistically. They have very much embraced the revolutionaries aesthetic and crafted a fascinating method in doing so. It's this great combination of this pseudo-Marxist Bolshevik uprising mixed with the hills have eyes in the populace. What's particularly enjoyable about their uprising is that often from their point of view, the reasons they have are extremely justified. Most of the members of the GSC are the
well, I mean, why would it not be? Because the Imperium is incredibly repressive, and if you do not do your 16-hour shift every day for the rest of your life, you will just be gotten rid of, and then somebody else will take your position. Humans do not matter in the Imperium of Man, so it is quite easy for some people to suddenly go, hang on a minute, maybe this isn't such a great thing after all, and an old Jimmy boy over there is he's talked some mad shit, but it's got some sense.
extremely impoverished and menial laborers of the Imperium, who honestly wouldn't need an alien presence to provide a manifesto on reasons to revolt. Their weapons are all makeshift and often involve things like mining lasers, drilling saws, demolition charges, giant stop signs. Their political machinations work quite well, as the cult ends up being really good at assassination, especially when you have a third arm holding a pistol beneath all those robes. They're a faction rife with fascination and culture, and their plans are generations in the making, to the end goal of being thrown right back into the soup by the star children they prepared the world for. And those are the threats to the galaxy now. The degradation of almost every species is now behest by the Tyranid menace, and all of the infighting between each and every single one of them will be their undoing. The world of Warhammer is a bleak and horrendous one, and that is in its own right the charm. It is so large, so vast, so absolutely horrendous and insane, and yet is treated with 100% severity and seriousness. In the beginning of part 1, I gave you an abridged and different opening to the Warhammer world, the grim darkness of the far future, and I leave you with this part 2 with the full quote itself. It is the 41st millennia. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass writhing invisibly with power from the dark age of technology. He is the carrion lord of the Imperium, for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day so that he may never truly die. Yet even in his deathless state, the Emperor continues his eternal vigilance. Mighty battle fleets across the demon-infested miasma of the warp, the only route between distant stars, their way lit by the Astronomicon, the psychic manifestation of the Emperor's will. Vast armies give battle in his name on uncounted worlds. Greatest amongst his soldiers are the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, bioengineered super warriors. Their comrades in arms are Legion, the Imperial Guard, and countless planetary defense forces, the ever-vigilant Inquisition, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, to name only a few. But for all their multitudes, they are barely enough to hold off the ever-present threat from aliens, heretics, mutants, and worse. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. There is no peace amongst the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter and the laughter of thirsting gods. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Bricky. And thank you all who have decided to stick with me for this potentially 3.5 hour ramble again, because I do ramble sometimes. Who knows if there will be another thing that will come out of Bricky on 40k in this kind of style. If there is, it'll probably pop up in my feed, and then I might do a reaction to it. If not, then who knows where the future goes. I certainly don't, which is why I'm fucking sitting here. Yeah.